Welcome to the Real Estate Finder podcast. I'm Matthew Maschler, real estate broker with the signature real estate companies here in the great state of Florida. And with me, the co-host of the Real Estate Finder podcast, Staci Garcia. Hi, Staci.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
Also, we have today Jill Glanzer. Hi, Jill. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great.
All right. So we recently had an interesting buyer who was interested in a property and got himself involved in a bidding war. Staci, do you remember when we used to have these bidding wars during COVID?
I do. I miss them.
You miss them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a way to recreate a bidding war
Okay.
in any market, flat market, cold market, hot or cold. There's a way to recreate a bidding war.
How do you do it?
You do a real estate auction.
An online auction?
It can be online
Okay.
or it can be in person.
Okay.
Because with an auction, there's a deadline. And if you can get multiple people who are interested in the property to make bids by a deadline, you can create a bidding war. And that is why sometimes people choose to sell real estate at auction.
What's the risk on that? I mean, do they have a, what do you call it?
You're asking what happens if the property sells too cheaply?
Yeah, do they have
to the seller?
What do you call it? The minimum?
A minimum price or a reserve.
Reserve.
Sometimes
Right.
there's a reserve price. And
Right.
yeah, you can do an auction with a reserve price, and you can either post and publish the reserve price or keep it private.
Right.
Before we get there, though,
Okay.
I want to address a misconception in auctions. Many times people who hear that a property is going for auction think it's distressed.
Right.
They think it's a foreclosure or bank-owned or something happened. And that can be true because usually if there's an auction, that's why.
Mm-hmm.
In a bank auction or a distressed or a foreclosure auction, the property is auctioned off to the highest bidder. It's being repossessed by the bank, and they're trying to, for the same reason why anybody would sell at auction. Think of the benefits, right? You have an offer by a certain day, right? I want an offer by next Thursday. So I'll just take the best offer I get by next Thursday. So that's what the sheriff and the court is going to do when they foreclose on a property, because they don't want to list it, market it for months the way a traditional real estate is sold. So because they want a date certain, and the date certain is more important than the price in those auctions. But you can have a nice house, a luxury house, listed for auction, and the benefit to the seller is knowing that they're going to get a contract, right? I want this property under contract by next week, and I want to close in 30 days, right? If your seller tells you that, right, your answer is going to be, we should do an auction. So there is sometimes perceived value because people do think that they can get a property for less than it's worth at an auction, and that does happen. So you have to balance, right? When the seller has risk, you have to balance the benefit of having that offer by a certain day with the risk of having that offer be too low. But another benefit to the seller is recreating that bidding war. If you have something that's unique that a lot of people want, getting those potential buyers in the room bidding against each other gets the price of the property up. So the property that we're talking about was in Seven Bridges.
Uh-huh.
And
not in distress, just a regular.
It was not in
auction.
distress. It was
Okay.
a regular house that was for sale, and they chose to sell it by auction. And it fit the criteria. I had a particular buyer that fit the criteria for. So I reached out to the buyer and I said, "Hey, would you like to come see it?" We did a preview of the property. It fit his criteria. And the auction was an absolute auction, and that means no reserve. You talked about
Yes.
a reserve. An absolute auction means there's no reserve. That it'll go to the highest bidder regardless of price. Now, there is a safety valve for a seller, right? Oh my God, what if someone bids $100,000 for my
Right.
$3 million property? The safety valve is you don't open the auction. You have it, you have all the people there, and you have the auctioneer there. But if the seller or the auctioneer gets a sense that it's not going to sell for the money,
Yeah.
the seller can choose not to have the auction. But once the auction opens, then it goes to the highest bidder.
Do you have an idea already with the people in the room what their bids are going to be?
And that's why you want to make sure you hire a knowledgeable team.
Okay.
a realtor like me, a team like ours, that's knowledgeable about the process, and an auctioneer that's knowledgeable about the process. Because one of the auctioneer's jobs, it's not to stand in front of the room and go, 10, 10, who will give me 10, 10, 20, and sound like a cowboy and saying indecipherable words. One of their jobs is to make sure that they know who's in the room and they know what they're looking for and what they're looking to spend.
Okay.
So as a buyer, you want to have the house inspected before the auction because you don't have the inspection contingency.
Right.
You want to make sure your money's ready because you don't have a mortgage contingency.
Right. So these are all cash offers where you get to see the house. You can inspect it in advance.
You can inspect it in advance. You can see the house in advance. You can get your financing in advance. Even though it's a cash offer, you can still get financing. But it's, a 30-day close or a 45-day close, and it's essentially a cash offer.
And do they ask for a deposit, the auctioneer?
Yeah. So you make a deposit to register to bid.
Right.
On this one, I think it was a $25,000 deposit. So that obviously separates looky-loos from serious people. If you're not that serious, you're not going to make that $25,000 deposit. And you do that by bringing a money order to the auction. And if you're not the successful bidder, you just keep the money order.
Right.
You bring it back to your bank and return it. And then the rest of your initial deposit, you have like 3 days to make. So when the buyers come in, the buyer decides to buy it. In auctions, you have a buyer's premium, where whatever the price of the auction is, you have to add the auctioneer fee.
Right.
And that's usually 8%. Could be as high as 10%. So if a property sells for $1 million, you have an $80,000 buyer's premium added on top of that. And what I saw at this auction was brilliant. They said that whatever your opening bid is, you would not have to pay that 8% buyer's premium on. So let's say you value, and this house was valued, what do you think it was valued
around
at, Joe?
$3 million.
The house was worth about $3 million. It was listed for $5 million. You want to list the property high in the MLS because you want to create that perceived value.
Right.
If it was listed at 2.5, well, there were no buyers at 2.5. Why would someone come to the auction and pay more than that?
Right.
So you do want to list it a little bit high.
How long was it listed? Was it a new listing or?
It was like
a couple weeks.
Was it like 30 days maybe?
Yeah.
And it was listed for like 5 something, way over. It was fully furnished.
Yeah, it was listed for $5 million, fully furnished. The house was beautiful.
Right.
So let's say, you know what? The property's worth $3 million. I'd really love to get it for $2.6 million, right? But there's no way it's going to go for under $2.5 million. So if you come in and you make your opening bid, your pre-bid, your pre-registration bid, $2.5 million, then that $2.5 million is not subject to the 8% buyer's premium. And that gave me the aha moment. That's how you know
You're going to get good offers.
as a seller, right? If you have 7 people registered to bid and they all have their first registered bid to be exempt from the 8%, a decent enough number. Obviously, it's not going to be 3.5 because nobody wants to pay over.
Right.
But 2.5, 2.6, 2.7. Okay, so when these people come in, they'll start there. But then when the juices are flowing and people start bidding, and one of the ideas I had is, you could have maybe there's 2 buyers, right? A couple, they're buying the house together. One is usually more emotional than the other, really wants the house. So, okay, I want to be frugal and I want to keep my bid low and get close to the vest, and I don't want to pay over my number's 285. Well, if the bidding goes and now it goes at 285 and someone else goes to 285.50, are you going to lose the house when you go to look at your partner and your partner really wants to buy that, really wants the house and they've been looking for 6 months and it's the perfect house, it's their dream house.
Right.
You're really going to lose it for $50,000. So then you make that next bid at 2.9, someone else 2.950, and you get a lot of people in the room together. You have the bidding war, and I'm telling you, I think of myself as logical as possible. When I've been in a bidding situation, I've always bid more than I originally planned.
Right.
There was a house, remember, Jill, the house in Stone Creek Ranch that I bid on. That was a distressed sell. And I kept bidding. I kept going, all right, one more bid.
That's
All right,
how it was when you did, what was it? The one on 441.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're like, okay, hit it again.
Yeah, one more bid.
Right.
So, and those were more distressed sales. Those were bank owned or foreclosures. Staci, you've dealt with a lot of, foreclosure sales. So, one more bid, the juices are flowing. But in the luxury auction, especially in person, right, there's champagne, and then there's waitresses with little hors d'oeuvres.
Right.
One of the things that they always do is like a charity auction for a case of wine, gets people used to bidding.
Right.
And I know that when I've done charity auctions for fundraisers, if let's say 2 tickets to a Dolphins game, I'll start the bidding at $1 because you want everybody to raise their hand to get used to bidding.
Right.
I will tell you, there was a house on the Intercoastal years ago. One of my friends was an auctioneer, and for fun, I went to go see it, and I wanted to watch the auction, and the house was a little dated. Like, not a lot of people would like the decor. Mm-hmm. Except that it was exactly my decor. It was as if somebody went into my brain and said, Matt, design a house.
Right.
So it was all my favorite colors. And other people would look at the house and need to redo it, but a lot of blues, a lot of purples, all my favorite colors. The kitchen was like, oh my God, like a lot of other people would want to redo this house. To me, the house was gorgeous and designed almost as if it was designed for me. The master bedroom was terrible. And the bidding was low, and I started bidding a little bit. And Wendy was with me, and she did not want to buy this house. And I was bidding a little bit. She's like, "What are you doing?" And then I raised my hand to ask a question at one point, and I realized that you can't do that.
Right.
You can't do that. You raise your hand, you're bidding. And I was very lucky someone outbid me.
Right.
But I remember that sharply. So I tell people I'm with, sit on your hands, put your hands in your pockets.
There are no questions.
We did one of these. It was we did one of these auctions. I represented a buyer at the Excelsior condo on A1A near the Boca Raton Beach Club, and we were the only buyer that showed up. You can't have an auction with only one.
They
buyer.
didn't open they just never opened it.
They never opened
right.
it. They never opened it. But it turned out that we got into a room. My buyer, the seller, and my buyer, they got into a room. They worked out a deal. My buyer actually bought the property, and had it just been listed at a stupid high number,
it would have never happened.
We would never have even come seen it.
He wouldn't have felt a sense of urgency.
There was no urgency once the auction was over.
Right.
But he was there and he wanted it.
And he figured the right parties were there to speak to. Let me get this deal done.
And we did the deal.
Right.
So I have a house that is coming to market next year in Woodfield that's going to have golf. And I was thinking, maybe we should do an auction for this one because Woodfield has a golf waiting list years, 100 strong.
It's a country club, everybody who doesn't know what Woodfield is.
Woodfield Country Club.
Yeah.
I still hear around town, someone the other day said that, they bought a polo club because they couldn't have golf in Woodfield.
Right.
So, so this one will have golf, and it gets between a 200 and a 500K premium for the golf. And I'm thinking if I can get the right people in the room to bid against each other, could really, really make a difference and get people going. That's why I've been thinking about it.
Because there'll be a guy who really wants golf. It's not even about the house, and that's the only house. And then there's this auction. Why don't I go? I want to get golf. I'll just redo the house, or I'll just leave it as a seasonal whatever.
Or it's a great house.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a beautiful
home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but if you can find 3 or 4 people
there are
that want it, and they're in the room at the same time, and let's face it, the type of person who could afford and wants a country club home with golf is a little bit competitive.
Right.
So do you think that your market for that in particular house would be someone in Woodfield waiting on that list?
So no, someone up north that wants to move to Boca.
Okay, because I would think the people waiting on maybe someone waiting on your golf list is like, oh, you know what? I really like that house too.
Right, but then they'd have to
sell
the
their
house.
Yeah.
Sell the house. Sell their house, or buy the house, strip it of golf, and then sell it back.
Great, we'll sell it. We'll sell it for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, I think it's someone who's in town temporarily looking for a golf home in Woodfield, either in New York, New Jersey,
right,
that wants to move down here, or they're in a condo or in a rental, and they're waiting for the right house to hit the market because there's also a lack of inventory.
Yeah,
it's a 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom house, 5,000 square feet, and with golf, it's going to check a lot of boxes for a lot of people. So if I can get all of those people at the same time, bidding against each other and I can really create that buzz, I can create that bidding war. And, that's what I'm thinking of. The question is, do I want to pay the auctioneer to do it?
That's my question. So let's say the auctioneer waives the $80,000 or whatever the buyer premium is for the first bid. Where do they get paid from? They get paid from the seller?
Well, there's still the rest of the bidding. There's still plenty of money.
Right.
Because it's just the opening bid
the
that
opening
you're
bid.
not paying the 8% on.
They're gonna
So if
be
it's
bidding.
$2 million, you're not going to pay the 160. But if you go to 2.5 million, anything over the 2 million, right, the 500,000,
Right.
it's still a lower buyer's premium they would have gotten.
And it may be 2%. It may be six of the 8. So it may be 2% of that opening bid, and then the full 8 on the rest. So there's plenty of money to be made here.
Right, and the buyers register prior to the auction, so that way the seller knows who's coming.
Right.
There's a registration deadline.
Right.
You can't just show up.
Right. The buyers have to register.
Right.
And file their opening bid and have their money ready. And it worked out perfectly. Do you remember when we sold something this way in Loxahatchee?
Yes.
And we got the bid plus the premium. The winning bid is called the hammer price.
Oh.
The hammer price plus the buyer premium is the total. And we got exactly what the house was worth.
Right.
And we did that because it was our friend that was the auctioneer, and I just wanted to do a deal with him.
Yeah.
But we got exactly what the house was worth, but we got it done timely, efficiently. Got our offer, got the contract.
And there's also no contingencies on it, so then they don't do an inspection.
No inspection.
They can maybe do a pre-inspection, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I would do if it was my listing is I'd have an inspection, and then I'd have the
a
inspection report right there,
attached.
right there as part of the marketing material.
Is there an issue with the HOA or with the country club, or do they allow? Does it matter?
Do they allow auctions?
Yeah.
It's just like a party at your house.
It's just a marketing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an open house. It's a showing.
Right.
From the day of the auction is the same as a party. The other thing I was thinking about doing is offering, if I do it for my listing, is talking to the seller to see if the seller would offer seller financing. Because the seller may do 50% seller financing.
Right.
So if the house is $5 million, the buyer pays two and a half, and then can finance the other 2.5 with the seller holding the paper.
Yeah.
So I will talk to you offline, though. They did raise the price of golf transferability and the golf membership.
So is it worth? You have to decide if it's worth it for you to buy the golf transferability and the golf membership, and then sell it for more money. Is it really worth it?
Yeah, the listing in Woodfield does not have golf, and it's number 8 on the waiting list.
Oh.
So when it comes off the waiting list, it's going to cost $150,000 to get golf with transferability. So
What does that mean, transferability?
Transferability means that you can, when you sell the house,
You transfer to
your
the buyer?
buyer can buy the golf membership. If the house doesn't have transferability, then the buyer has to go into the wait list.
Okay.
And the seller can use his golf without transferability, but he can't transfer it to a buyer. So if you buy golf, if somebody who lives in a house and is on the golf waiting list buys a golf membership.
Let me rewind for a second. For the last 20 years, before COVID, nobody bought transferability.
Got you. I didn't even know it was a thing then.
Because there was never a problem to get golf.
Right.
So if golf was in demand, you needed transferability. All the first members all bought transferability because they thought their buyer would want the golf, especially on a bigger house. But for the last 20 years, the demand wasn't there, so nobody bought transferability. Because if the buyer buys a house, if they want golf, they just get golf. But now, because after COVID, all the golf memberships got sold, most houses in Woodfield don't have transferability. So if the house is sold and the buyer wants to buy a golf membership, they have to go on the waiting list.
What is the difference between the regular golf membership and the golf membership with transferability? Is it a big difference?
How much does it cost?
Yeah.
In 2005, when I joined Woodfield, transferability was $20. In 2021, when the waiting list was created, transferability was $50.
Annually?
No.
Oh, one time.
To buy the ability to transfer to sell your golf.
Okay.
And now they just announced they're raising transferability at Woodfield to $100K.
Wow.
Now it's because buyers are paying a premium for golf, so the club wants some of that premium.
Yeah, makes sense.
So if I moved to Woodfield and I got off the waiting list, when when you come off the waiting list, if you want golf, they'll say, would you also like the transferability? And it's an extra $100K to buy the transferability.
Wow.
Which for 20 years, nobody bought.
Mm-hmm.
So hypothetically, or maybe already, if you had a house that, because you don't play golf, and you had a house and you were like, oh, la, 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 I don't need it. Can you get it later when you think?
Golf?
Yeah.
You used to be able to.
Oh, no, you can't.
So this happened to plenty of people that live in Woodfield. Vacation home in Woodfield, they lived in Ohio.
Yeah.
Their social membership had enough golf to play once in a while, but they always knew when they retired and moved to Boca full time, they would upgrade to golf. So this happened in 2022. A guy who's been a member, who owned a house in Woodfield for a very long time, moved to Woodfield. Yep, he sold a house in Ohio, retired. He was a doctor, retired, moved
in full time.
Moved in full time, went into membership office and said, I'd like to upgrade to golf. They said, well, I'm sorry, unfortunately, there's a waiting list for golf. And he was number 50. They put him number 50 on the waiting list. And he goes, but you said I could come in any time and upgrade to golf.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
You could come in any time.
That was true.
Right.
That was true for 20 years. You can come in any time and upgrade to golf. But now that there's no golf memberships left, you can't.
Right.
And the person was very mad. This was always their plan. Maybe they fast forwarded it a few years because of COVID.
Yeah.
But it was always their plan to upgrade to golf. And now they're number 50 on the wait list.
Did they get pissed and sell?
What I try to convince him to do was to rent in another club.
Oh.
Rent out his house in Woodfield and rent in another club that has golf and live there while he waited. But there's about 6 or 7 houses that come off the wait list every year. Mm-hmm. So being 50 on the wait list,
not so bad.
It's 8 or 9 years.
That is bad.
If you retire at 60,
right,
65, 8 or 9 years is a long time.
Yeah, that would suck.
Yeah, it sucks for a lot of people being on the wait list. There's but that's the market. That's supply and demand. So and that's why Broken Sound got a lot of buyers that would have bought in Woodfield and Polo Club and Boca Woods, where we sold that house in Boca Woods. Stonebridge Country Club, you would never see. There's school buses in Boca Woods and Stonebridge now. You never saw that before. All the other clubs started where the houses that didn't sell because of mandatory membership, they all started selling. So
that's interesting.
So going back to the auction, our guy was outbid. The high bid was about 2.8, and with the buyer's premium, it came into about 3.1, which is right what the house should have sold for.
Right.
But had it been listed as a regular listing for 3.2, it might have taken much longer to sell because there was no sense of urgency.
Yeah.
And
it's just another house.
Yeah.
But by doing the auction, the luxury auction, not a distressed auction, they got all of the interested parties, all of the people that wanted to buy this house or a house in a room at the same time, and they created their own mini bidding war.
I guess if there's if they can pull out, and then you know what I mean. Like I would always be nervous about the reserve part.
Yeah.
No reserve.
Yeah. So if you're as a seller, if you're nervous, you don't open the auction.
Right.
And that's the scary part for that Woodfield house. But it's something that when the time comes, when that listing comes, we'll reach out to the auctioneer. That I like this company. I'll give a shout out. Give a shout out to Platinum Luxury Auctions out of Miami, Trey or Lesnock, and they do these luxury auctions all over the country. I've seen their ads for Colorado and all over the country. I've brought buyers to their auctions. Again, we completed one successfully at the Excelsior, and then we brought buyers to some of their other auctions. Sometimes the auctions go successfully, and sometimes they don't open the auction.
Right.
But it is a very creative way to create a mini bidding war.
They're doing the advertising for you around the country.
Both the listing agent and the auctioneer company should market the property.
Okay.
And which is why I always get a call anytime
there's an auction anywhere.
Anytime this company does an auction in the state of Florida.
Oh, okay.
Right, I get that call.
Right.
Which I respect, right, because they're recognizing that I've done business with them in the past.
Right.
So basically, the agent still might have a listing agreement or they will have a listing agreement with the seller for a certain percentage of commission.
With us,
right?
If one of your sellers wants to do it, they still have a listing agreement with you,
right?
With signature. Signature, from a marketing point of view, brings in the auctioneer. It could be Platinum Luxury Auctions. It could be Elliott Paul and Co. Shout out to our friends at Elliott Paul and Co. That's who we did our Loxahatchee auction with. But the listing agent and the auctioneer work together to sell the property.
Right.
So when it comes time next year to sell that Woodfield property, I'd like to have a meeting with Trayer and with Platinum Luxury and consider the risks and the costs and the benefits. But the benefit is you're getting interested parties in the room at the same time, creating a mini bidding war, getting the house under contract on a certain date, and getting that closing on a certain date, and having a contract without contingencies.
Yeah, that's a great advantage.
Yeah. So a lot of pros, a lot of cons. One of the cons that also is you may eliminate a few interested buyers that don't understand the process, might be intimidated by the process.
I could see that.
Yeah. Which is why I was thinking for one of our smaller listings, one of our 3-2s on Boca Raton Road, should we do an auction? But I do think that without the financing and being a little sophisticated, I do worry that you would lose a couple of buyers because of that. But I think, especially when you have something unique and in demand, doing an auction and creating that bidding war is a good, or can be a good way.
I'm going to mention this to my seller.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he does have something unique based on location. Yours was unique based on golf membership. You know what I mean?
Next year's would be, yeah.
Yep.
And the one in Seven Bridges was unique because it was a beautiful, fully furnished, turnkey situation, right?
Can they make, well, they're bidding, so they already know that they're getting a furnished home, right? What if they didn't want it furnished? I guess they're getting rid of the furniture.
If the buyer doesn't want the furniture, the buyer can do with it what they wish.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining us on the Real Estate Finder podcast. If you would like more information about how to buy or sell a home at auction, whether it's distressed, foreclosures or bank owned or luxury, we'd be happy to discuss it with you. For all of your real estate needs, feel free to reach out to Staci at Real Estate Finder, Jill at Real Estate Finder, www.realestatefinder.com.
The future looks bright and the storms pass by. The sky's dark blue and it's almost that time. Light shows, cameras flash when I pass. Living in the moment, forget about the past. They save the best for last. Matthew Mania, we about to make a splash.